I'm glad you could join me. Recently, I gave a presentation on world building at an online science fiction convention, and I was approached a lot afterwards to see if I had a print version or a PDF of the presentation that I could hand out. I didn't because most of the talk was just pictures from me talking over it. So it seemed that if I did a recording like this, then that would help the people who wanted to study the presentation in more detail. So what I'm going to talk about today is world building in science fiction. Now, I think there's a lot of nonsense talked about world building. People seem to make it far more complicated than it actually needs to be. And the reality is there are three easy steps or three easy rules that if you follow, you'll create a rich universe that people really respond to. Okay, so who am I and why am I qualified to speak on this subject? So I was born in Manchester in the UK a long time ago, and then have been fortunate enough to have lived and worked in London, Sydney, and now New York, where I live. For the majority of that time, over 20 years, I was an architect, and I was very fortunate to have worked for the company Grimshaw Architects. Now, Grimshaw is a company that specializes in creating new environments through high-tech architecture, and they try and use the latest methods of construction and technology to create new habitats. Here are two good examples here. I'm including these so you can get a feeling for my background and how I got into science fiction. To the left-hand side is the Eden project in Cornwall, where Grimshaw created a series of lightweight, translucent biomes in an old rock quarry. And then on the inside of the biomes, they created different habitats, this one being the rainforest biome. So you can really see how it's an amazing and a unique location. On the right-hand side is the Duke University Students' Union building, which is very, beautiful, clean, glassy, modern environment inserted between two much older buildings. So that was my kind of design education, was working for this company. And then approximately 5 years, well, in my 30s, I wrote a trilogy, a science fiction trilogy that wasn't very good and never got published, but I learned a huge amount from writing it. I did my 10,000 hours or my 1 million words in that time. And then 5 years ago, I quit architecture and decided to get back into science fiction writing. So I've written a new trilogy, the third book of which is getting published hopefully in the summer of this year. And I've also written three novellas that go alongside those stories. Pattern Spec takes part before the book one, Contact Binary bridges books two and three, and then New York 2055 is kind of an expanded design guide explaining events that have happened in the books and the novellas. These are downloadable for free from my website, so if you use that QR code, you can go and get them. Okay, so the first easy rule is for world building, you need a big idea. And I mean a really, really big idea. An idea so big that it changes society. Now, I'm going to look at this as an example from my own work. But before I get to that, I'm going to look at it in contemporary fiction and some big ideas in the shows that we know. Now, the first is The Expanse. Now, The Expanse is, if you don't know, is a series of 9 novels that have been turned into a fantastic TV show. The Expanse deals with mankind's expansion from Earth out into the solar system. And this is made possible by the Epstein drive, which is a kind of a fusion rocket engine. How it really works isn't explained in that much detail. You just know that you need fuel and more engines for bigger ships and so on and so on. So the show isn't about the Epstein drive, but the Epstein drive is the big idea that makes the entire world building possible. And by adding in a floor or a limit, such as needing fuel, gives you a way of introducing some narrative drama. The ship's always running out of fuel or getting close to it. So it's a big idea that's in the background of the series. Another one is the much missed TV show Persons of Interest. And Persons of Interest is about AI. After 9/11, the NSA creates an AI to supervise people. So the show is about the limits of surveillance and freedom on people. But it's also really about the birth of artificial intelligence as well. Now, the machine is a character that appears in the show, but for most of the time, it's just a concept in the background, the big idea of a surveillance state and how important as individual freedoms in a world that's dangerous. So again, the big idea is AI, but it's part of the background, just setting the scene for the characters that live in it. And the last example I'll use is Altered Carbon. Altered Carbon is a fantastic book and an average TV show. But the big idea in Altered Carbon is stack resleeving. All that means is a way of digitizing your consciousness and transferring it from person to person. And again, the limitations on that technology is a transferal takes part in a piece of technology inserted in your neck. And if that stack gets destroyed, then the person dies and can't be reproduced. So it's a really nice way of creating a science fiction world where people can swap bodies and travel massive distances, but at the same time, they also still remain vulnerable. So that flaw in the technology or limit is really important. So hopefully it wasn't obvious from those three examples is the idea does not have to be original. AI was not invented by the showrunners of Persons of Interest. Rocket engines were not developed by James S.A. Corey when they were writing The Expanse. Okay, so the idea does not have to be original. It's how you use it that establishes your world. So the big idea in the Cortex universe is artificial intelligence, automation, and the economy. Yep, I said it, you don't have to be original, right? So this is a white paper from December 2016, released by the White House. This is right when I had left my job and I was really looking for things to do with the future. And so I was reading widely about AI because I was very interested in it. This was a very sobering document to read because it spelled out in a very clean, simple way that AI and then automation are going to have a massive impact upon society, leading to huge unemployment levels, and the consequences of that could be very fundamental and far reaching. So I thought, oh, I'll have some of that. I'm going to use that idea. And so the Cortex series I'm writing starts out with the idea of AI and automation. See, there really is no need to be original at your concept level. So when it came to designing the AI or the mechanical intelligences in my book, this was going to be the big idea, the Epstein drive of my series. I wanted to have some idea of what they would be like and some idea of their strengths and limits. I think in reality, artificial intelligence is going to be distributed across server farms, or in the cloud, in the same way that we have, Siri or Alexa right now. But I wanted to do something a bit different. I wanted to make them a physical object that, while they obviously would speak to you through your phone or whatever, the internet or VR, it would actually be an object that your characters could go and see in a way that, going to meet a prophet on a mountainside would be the same as going to see one of these intelligences. Now, I've always been an admirer of Charles Babbage. Charles Babbage was born in 1791 and he developed the world's first computer. I know now people tend to think that happened in the 1940s with Alan Turing developing machines in the UK during the Second World War. But Babbage had developed something 100 years before that. This is his analytical engine, and as you can see, it's a clockwork digital computer, which is a crazy thing to consider. What we have on the left there is one of the prototype parts of its circuitry. On the right, we have one of the two working prototype models. Now, this difference engine or analytical engine had a 7 kilohertz clock speed and 675 megabytes of memory in 1830, nearly 200 years ago at this, which is really astonishing. Now, the trouble with Babbage is that he was a designer. He was a Steve Wozniak. He wasn't a Steve Jobs, and so was never able to convincingly sell this product and create a business out of it. So it's a real kind of sliding doors moment in, in humankind. This had gone into production in 1830. So I wanted my AI to be mechanical or based upon those circuit designs, but then just reduced down to a nanoscopic or picoscopic scale. And this was a drawing, the very first drawing I did of the AI. And I included this just to show you that your sketches can be really, really scrappy or unimportant. But I do think it's important to keep a scrapbook or a sketchbook. And when you have ideas, you jot them down. And if possible, you try and draw out what you think they would look like. Because by drawing it out, it makes you think about the size of it, what it would look like, what it would smell like, whether it be cold or hot, something like that. And those are the details that makes your world richer. So the idea of my mechanical intelligences at this point is that they would be quite small in scale, say a 12-inch diameter bulb that would require so much energy and so much cooling that you would have to build a nuclear reactor along with each mechanical intelligence and then have a building size cooling system alongside it. So and I'll explain that more in a second. So I took this sketch, and just because I'm fortunate enough to have the training of an architect, I was able to put it into a 3D model. This is the first one I did. And what you see here is you have the MI, which is that sphere in the middle, that sits on top of this rod. And then branching off from that are heat sinks. And that whole thing sits within a kind of armor glass tank of refrigerated oil that goes through those slots in the ground and goes up. So it comes in, freezing cold or way below freezing, and then gets sucked out and cooled in these building size cooling systems. And then that led me to this one, which is kind of the final design I did for it, where the heat sinks are perforated to really maximize their surface area. And then it sits within this armor glass box, almost like a piece of art you would see in a museum, something that is very special, almost like on a pedestal. And this all came from just doing that kind of rubbishy sketch I had at the start. And that led me to this point here where I started to think about what it'd be like when you actually met this machine in real life. And that gives your character a way to react to the object, but also how they would feel beforehand and after they'd met the AI. In this drawing, I have Charles Takamatsu, which is the inventor of the MI, and this is when he's unveiling it to the UN. It's an occasion which he thinks would be, kind of groundbreaking for mankind, something incredibly special. But in actual fact, the people who go to the unveiling just want to drink the, fantastic wines he's put out there, or eat the cheese and crackers, and flirt with people and have selfies taken with this machine. And what this does is you don't know at the time, but that mechanical intelligence Primus is really annoyed that people aren't more impressed by it. It's a very proud entity, and that has big implications in the future of the books. But this all came out of me again, just doing that little scrappy sketch at the start and thinking, what is the big idea for this series? And then later on, I have variations in that design where they get decreased in size and become cylindrical objects, smaller, and then they get miniaturized and miniaturized until they get integrated into clothing and stuff like that. But that all came from reading that White House paper on AI and automation and its impacts upon the environment. So rule number one is get a big idea, a really, really big societal changing idea. Doesn't have to be original. Give it a floor. The floor of my MIs is they require so much power and energy and cooling requirements that makes them difficult to exist in many situations. So that's rule one. I am now going to stop this video and I'm going to do another one, which is going to be step two in a three-step way to easily build future worlds.